Hello. Today I want to talk with you about critical thinking. In this day of tweets and sound bites and memes, it's a skill that's all but lost to neglect and intellectual indolence, where all we know is what we've read on the internet or seen on television or read on Facebook. We're sitting ducks for misinformation and disinformation and even out-and-out propaganda. When the headline hucksters and purveyors of propaganda know that will not analyze anything or evaluate anything or think critically about anything, then they can say pretty much anything and we'll buy it, which is a way of saying that no skill is more practical and functional than learning how to analyze arguments, that is, to think critically. But unfortunately, critical thinking tends to conjure up big, thick, windy, ponderous tomes on logic filled with Latin phrases and esoteric disciplines. And so most people just forego critical thinking altogether. And that's a shame, because learning how to think critically about things is perhaps the most important intellectual skill you'll ever master. You'll use it every day, not just in the classroom, but in the boardroom and coffee shop and checkout counter. You'll use it in everything you do, from reading the newspaper to listening to your friends debate the merits of the latest political issues to deciding whether or not the salesperson is telling you the truth, to talking about your faith with those who start from a very different point of view than you do. But the question is, do I have to take a course in logic to learn to think critically? No, you don't. In teaching critical thinking through the years, I've developed a simple, easy way of teaching critical thinking that is both easy to remember and practical to use. I call it the 3 A's of critical thinking. The 3 A's of critical thinking boil down to these 3 things. First, assumptions. What the person smuggles into the conversation without stating it or often even being aware of it. 2, arguments. There are both valid and invalid ways to argue. And so this has to do with the uncovering and identification of incorrect ways of arguing, logical fallacies. And authorities. To what does one appeal to settle it? Do they appeal to experience, to tradition, to the views of the experts, to their own feelings, to the scriptures, and if so, whose scripture, or to reason? So let's look briefly at each of these. First, assumptions. These are things one brings to the conversation without realizing they're doing so. Here's an example. Why did you deduct points from my assignment? Well, there's an assumption in there. Assignments begin with a perfect score. Now, that may be true, or it may not be true, but the student never states it. They just assume it to be true. Assumptions can be valid or invalid, but faulty assumptions invariably lead to faulty conclusions. Next is arguments. All arguments appeal to reason, and only reason validates an argument. Hence, there are correct and incorrect arguments. It's not just a matter of one's preference or opinion. But when one says, your views have causes, not reasons, a logical fallacy is introduced. Let me give you an example. Liberal scholars support the North Galatian theory. Now, there's an inference in there. There is a cause for supporting the North Galatian theory, namely liberalism, rather than valid reasons. They support it because they are liberal scholars. Now, that's an ad hominem fallacy. We are dismissing the argument because we are dismissing the arguer. The North Galatian theory is true or false based solely on the evidence and the merits of the argument, irrespective of the views of the arguer. Even if a sociopath says 3 times 3 equals 9, he's correct. Irrespective of other shortcomings, his arithmetic is fine. Let me just identify for you quickly several logical fallacies that I see most often in people's arguing and in students' writing. First, there is the straw man argument. That's caricaturing an argument just to make it easier to discredit, presenting the weakest possible case and then discrediting that. Then there is what's called the ad hominem argument. I just mentioned that a moment ago. That's attacking the messenger as a way of discrediting the message. Then begging the question. It's a circular argument where the conclusion is already included in the premise or the question. News is fake because most of the news is fake news. See that? And then, and I see this a lot, appeal to authority. That's asserting that because an expert thinks something is so, it must be so. Well, experts can be wrong, often are. And then comes cherry picking the data. That's carefully sifting or picking the data to suit an argument and ignoring all the data that doesn't. There is the false cause fallacy, presuming that a connection between things means that one caused the other. But correlation and causation are not the same. An example, the data show that an increase in the bird population is coincident with the presence of blackberries. Hence, birds cause blackberry plants to produce fruit. Now, that's patently false, but what's happened here is we've assumed that a correlation is a causation, and it's not. Then the false dilemma, where two alternatives are presented as the only possibilities when more possibilities exist. You either agree with me or you're of the devil. And then the anecdotal fallacy, where you use personal experience or isolated examples instead of real evidence and arguments. An example, my grandfather smoked 4 packs a day and lived to be 104. So don't believe all these bogus studies that say smoking is bad for your health. Well, your grandfather was the exception to the rule. And then finally, authorities. And that is, to what does one appeal to settle an argument? An example, you ask me how I know he lives? He lives within my heart. See, that's an appeal to personal experience. And that's okay, but remember, it's just your experience. It's not everybody's experience. Now, what are the options of authorities? To what do people appeal? Well, they appeal to experience. They appeal to the experts. They appeal to tradition, what they've always heard or been taught. They appeal to their feelings. They appeal to the scriptures. But then you have to ask whose scripture. And then they appeal to reason. Now, reason is the most reliable ground on which to appeal in critical thinking because it is universally objective, accessible, and valid. It's not just your reason or my reason, it's our reason. Everyone has access to it. Let me give you an example. I live near the city of Charlotte, North Carolina. Now, if Charlotte existed only in my experience or in tradition or in the beliefs of experts, then there would be nothing objective, not yours or mine, but ours, to which I could appeal. We can argue about the city of Charlotte only because there is a real city of Charlotte accessible to both of us via reason and appeal to evidence. If there were no city of Charlotte, then there would be no point in arguing or debating it at all. And so listen carefully to the authorities to which one appeals to settle an argument, and then ask, how reasonable is that appeal? And so to summarize, critical thinking involves 3 things: assumptions, arguments, and authorities. Pay attention to these things the next time you hear a debate or a discussion, and you will feel more comfortable and confident in your own ability to assess and weigh the claims people are making around you. Till next time, take care. God bless.